Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to another critique of the week. So glad you could join me. It is, Friday, November 12th. And we have two excellent poets today, Chou and Anam Tariq are the two poets that we'll be looking at two of their poems each today. Now, as always, the point of the critiques, if you're new, is to give that workshop experience to people who might not have the opportunity to be in a writing workshop where they get to experience and see what readers actually feel when they look at their poems. It's a really valuable thing to do. It's hard to ask your friends or family or whatever who are close to you and know what they feel about your poems because they're trying to be nice, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's really hard to get honest feedback. And also they know sort of you and your background and what's going on when you're in your writing in general. So encountering poems like a reader would encounter them, or an editor would encounter them, is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to give advice, what's working, what's not, any feedback and suggestions that you have, any ideas. Feel free to pass those along. And as always, please do click the like button and make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you share this if you can, anything like that. No matter what you do, if you click something or you comment, that really helps these kind of things spread around the internet. So please do that. Hello to Dick Westheimer. He's here over on YouTube. Who else we got? Dana Broadhead is here. Good morning, Dana, over on Facebook. And Sharon Ferrante, hello. Okay. So everything looks like it's up and running. Let's dive into these poems. Here we go. So the first poem I mentioned is right here. This is Chou, and the poem is Stagnant. Stagnant. You're 70% dihydrogen monoxide, dark and stinking of the alleyways, like day-old rain puddles. I'm sinking, my boat paper thin and without oars. The seagull in me, still dreaming of wings to save itself. So that is the first, a very short poem by Chou that is Stagnant. And this is one of those. So first of all, the title is, it sort of tells a little bit about what, in one word, as much as you could, it tells a little bit about what we're talking about here. Stagnant. Of course, a puddle would be stagnant water, but then I think feeling, the emotional feeling of being stagnant. So I think the title works. There's nothing wrong with a one-word title. I think it leads you in the direction that the poem is going. It sort of introduces the overall metaphor. And then we jump right in with the you, the second person, which is sort of feels to me in this case like kind of self-talk. So I'm assuming here that the speaker is speaking to themselves. But I'm not sure. And that's the issue always with these second-person poems, is that you're never sure at first who the you is. So I'm not sure, but we'll talk about that more in a second. So you're 70% dihydrogen monoxide, which is of course water. And I believe that's true. So we jump into the poem right there. Dark and stinking. I think this is the best, even though it's, dark and stinking of the alleyways, like day-old rain puddles. It's a very vivid image. I think that worked really well. I'm sinking. My paper thin, my boat paper thin and without oars. So again, we get this puddle, we get this really nice image here, which I think just works really well. It's very vivid, dark and stinking. That stinking is doing a lot of work of the alleyways. And then instead of just, we get an alley, which you imagine is like dirty and not meant for public view. That kind of setting for the puddles here, and then it's day old. So a lot of really good details that really bring this poem to life in this little stanza right here, which is why I like it. I'm sinking, my boat paper thin and without oars. So we go from the you to an I. We go from the second person to the first, which I'm not sure if that's what the purpose is there. So that makes me wonder if the you is actually you all, like us all, like could that be we? We're all 70% dihydrogen monoxide. Is that what the statement means there, or is this just a switch from talking to yourself in the second person to talking to yourself in the first person? I'm not sure. So it's a little, that shift doesn't really. It's not clear what it's doing or what the purpose is. So I'm not sure. I mean, I assume that it was with the you as self-talk at first, right? So then you're stinking. Your boat paper thin and without oars would make a little more sense. So I'm not sure. So that shift is something to watch for. But still, so figuring out who the subject is something important. But then still, I'm sinking my boat paper thin and without oars. Again, that's a good image, and it draws on this image. Like we imagine the these dark stinking puddles, and then we imagine a boat on the dark stinking puddles. And paper thin, so the water's coming in, no oars to move or steer the boat. I think that's a really great little metaphor. So I like this section of the poem. It's it's a sad kind of subject matter, but it's portrayed really well through strong images here. So I think these two work. Which third, the seagull in me, still dreaming of wings to save itself. And so here we get a transition from I go from a boat to a whole different metaphor of a seagull. And the seagull, to me, doesn't really fit because, we're stinking in the alleys. And you can imagine a paper boat in the puddle that some kid left in an alley. I always think of It in that very beginning scene where they're getting the paraffin for the bottom of the boat. And then that's what I think of when I think of the paper boats in general. So imagining that in a dark, stinking alleyway makes a lot of sense in my mind. But then we switch to a seagull, which is a totally different scene. The boat becomes a seagull, so it doesn't extend the metaphor. It's sort of, but even though it's sort of that in that uncanny valley a little bit, where it's not a totally, complete jump to a different metaphor, because the seagull still is sort of associated with the water. So the boat's imagining it's a seagull, and I think that contrast doesn't really fit. So I think maybe this stanza is what needs work, just on the metaphor level. But then also it feels a little bit like too explaining a little bit. So, it's sort of telling too much rather than letting the poem's imagery speak to itself. So this is the thing to work on, this last stanza, I think. Let's see. So let me see what the comments are. So Nate Jacob says, the seagull in me versus the H2O in you is an interesting tension. Well, the thing about, and Sharon Ferrante says, if it's not in general, we need to know who you're and I'm are. And so let's see, that's the seagull. This is Nate Jacob again. The seagull in me versus the H2O in you is an interesting tension, but I can't quite follow it. What is the me being saved? Cool and well-felt images, but maybe not quite tied into a single unit at the end. I like it, though. I just don't quite get it. Yeah, and so both these comments from Nate Jacob and from Sharon Ferrante are just touching on the main thing, is that it just feels a little off, and part of it is that we don't know who the you and the I is. As Sharon Ferrante says, if it's not general, we need to know who we're talking about. Like if the you is a specific person, and then the I is actually the speaker, then we don't know what their relationship is, and we don't know where to put that. So clear that up. And then there was a suggestion too. I think there was James. Yeah, James Cicillo suggests maybe a mosquito instead of a seagull. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where to go with the poem, actually. It's one of those things where you can see that it sort of took a wrong turn. I mean, the metaphor doesn't quite fit, and also it feels a little didactic. It feels like I wanted to tell you this, rather than letting you feel what's going on. And so this is one of those poems where I think it was working nicely and then sort of took a wrong turn, and it's hard to say where the turn, where you should go with it. But it's a great setup and great images. So finding where to turn in this last stanza is the suggestion. Sharon Ferrante says, I think it's a love story. And so that is a very possible, but the problem is that we don't know who the you is, so we can't tell that it's a love story. We really can't tell where to put this. In the conversation I did for the winter issue with James Pennebaker, we talked about the use of different kinds of words, and he talked about how if you find a note on the ground and it says "I'll be back," right? you don't know the context whatsoever. And so you don't know where to put that. Like, you don't know what any of it means. You know what it means on a semantic level, but not on an actual, because you don't know who, if it says, I'll be right back, you don't know when the note was left, who I am, who it's addressing. And that's the kind of problem that's going on in this poem here, is that we don't know who the you is. If we call this stagnant love poem, and then as soon as you see that it's a love poem, then you could know who the you is, right? It's the loved, or the lover, or whatever. So if it was stagnant love poem, then we'd know who the you is. You're 70%. But the problem with the you is that we're all 70% water, right? So I'm not sure about this beginning either. But I do love the two stanzas in the middle. And let's over on YouTube. Spartacus says, looks like a monologue. That's what I thought at first. So Sharon Frente thinks the love poem. I thought it was just talking to yourself about sort of feeling down. Richard Westheimer says, in such a short poem, the and takes up a lot of space. What about a comma after dark and after pebbles? Dark, stinking of the alleyways, like day old, or not, I think he meant puddles, like day old puddles. And that, so Richard is suggesting a comma here and cutting like that. Dark, stinking of the alleyways, like day old rain puddles. I'm sinking. My paper. Yeah, that's a nice line. That's a good way to run through that. A good suggestion. It is, when you have such a short poem, individual like syntax choices make such a big difference just in how the poem feels, because there's so little, it's minimalist, being only, 11 lines. So there's not a lot of detail to go on. So every choice really stands out and makes a big difference. So anyway, I really love this middle section, the images here. I just don't feel like it knows, or it's not telling us enough where to go or what the context is to relate to it. So it's hard to put ourselves in the shoes of the speaker when we don't know. Like, the speaker knows who the you is, but we don't. So we can't put ourselves into the shoes of the speaker, so we can't feel the emotions of the speaker. And that's kind of what's going on with this poem. So clear that up, and then the poem will come to life a little bit, and find a different way to go at the end. That was my suggestions for that one. Nate Jacob says, I thought it was a pre-breakup poem. And yeah, I could see that too. Like where our relationship is getting stagnant. I'm not sure. I mean, I think you could just go, there's a lot of ambiguity here. Kelly McQueen has a good, or McQuain, I should say, cover artist for the winter issue. Hey, Kelly, good to see you. It's a beautiful cover for the issue coming up. We can't wait for everybody to see it. But yeah, so the seagull in me still dreaming of wind to save itself. That makes it, that's a good suggestion. Excellent, Kelly, because wind makes it more interesting. That a seagull with wings. I mean, even though I sort of didn't really pay much attention to the stanza, because I think it's just off the track for a number of reasons, but it's a good point to make anyway. A seagull with wings is sort of a cliche. Like, if you hear a bird, you're going to think wings are coming up. But if wind is actually still interesting. It's not a cliche yet, I would say. And so it makes it better, dreaming of wind to save itself. I think that make it more interesting. I still think this whole stanza is just a wrong turn, though. So I would rewrite it and try to find, figure out what you. Obviously, the writer knows what the poem is about, or who the you is, right? So if it's stagnant love poem or something like that, or and then we can know who the you is. Write it from there, and then see where your imagination takes you after. Like, does the metaphor extend further without, or is there a way we can stick with the boat maybe? Or do we make a whole leap to something completely different? There's the whole, I don't know, there are a lot of poems. A lot of times we call them, the rope-a-dope poems, but where the last line completely changes the whole context of the poem. And there could be something like that here, where you just jump off, like the Duffy Farm poem. What is that one? The Lying in a Hammock. Who wrote that? I can't remember right now. But I've wasted my life. That kind of transition is a way you could go, or you could extend the metaphor. I mean, you have to like sort of let your imagination play, I think, at this point, and see where else the poem could take you. Let's look at the other one now. And this is Ode to a, there we go. Ode to a Former Doormate. And once again, this is Jackie Chou's poems. Nice to see Jackie here, by the way. Jackie is an LA resident, so I've seen her at live events a bunch of times. She used to come to our reading series every once in a while, and she also was just here for the poetry day. Anyway, Ode to a Former Doormate. She's gone, never to be found, gone with the blue ink of our era. On postcards we exchanged, gone with the procession of her fingers twirling her pasta at this ridiculously expensive place we frequented. Was it fettuccine Alfredo? She's gone, never to come around, gone with all the women in Cyber C who have the same name as her but are not her lacquered black hair, large brown eyes like a Japanese anime character, the grace she exuded, without having to say a word. She's gone, without a sound, gone beyond our once cherished girlhood. So this poem, I think, is much more complete, and I like the sounds of it a lot. Ode to a Former Doormate. So with the title, we know exactly what it's about, and it lets us. It's like a key, it unlocks the door to the poem, and we know what's going on immediately. Imagine if that title wasn't there. And she's gone, never to be found, gone with the blue ink. We don't know who the she is, but we know it's the former doormate we're talking about. She's gone, never to be found, gone with the blue ink of our era. I love that, blue ink of our era. What a great phrase that is. On postcards we exchanged, gone with the procession of her fingers twirling her pasta at this ridiculously expensive place we frequented. I think here, this little section right here is a little cluttery, and it sort of breaks up. There was this great repetition with the gons throughout the whole poem. And there's a lot of syllables. This ridiculously expensive place we frequented. That's almost a different register. And the fettuccine Alfredo is a lot too. A lot of very, very specific detail. Like it's sort of it's like a poem that's like looking at the whole scene, and then all of a sudden it zooms in on like one tiny little aspect of the scene and very fine detail in a way that's a little I don't know, it feels off. So I would sort of change this. Probably cut this. The blue ink of our era is such a cool description. And the specificity of the fettuccine Alfredo and the ridiculously placed, it pulls us out of the poem in a way. I would just cut those two lines. Without him, it feels even better. She's gone with the precision of her fingers twirling her pasta. I think maybe the sense that we wanted to expand this comes from it feels like it needs another gone right here. There's sort of a rule of three in our brains, and it feels like it's missing something if you don't get the third detail. If you get two, and it's sort of setting up a pattern. And then there's not either a nod to the pattern, like we're not going to do this intentionally, or the pattern repeating intentionally. It feels like it usually has to do with one or the other, or else we feel like we're missing something. And so, gone with if we read the poem like this, she's gone, never to be found, gone with the blue ink of our era on postcards we exchanged, gone with the precision of her fingers twirling her pasta, gone with whatever, with the same structure. I'm saying? The gone with. It needs another detail here. And also that fleshes out the character, too, of the doormate. So I would add another gone with here. Right here. And cut this is too, it just doesn't fit that detail. Instead, go with another gone with. But gone with blah, 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 blah. She's gone, never to come around. Gone with all the women in Cyber C is a kind of awkward. And maybe it would be better with just the article the in there. Gone with the women in the cyber sea, who have the same name as her but are not her. I love that. This is a good line. Who have the same name as her but are not her. I really like that. That's good stuff. Oops, not that one. That one. But anyway, not her lacquered black hair, large brown eyes, like a Japanese anime character. I meant to check that line. That's good. So we get these details. It's really nice, sort of character sketch of who she is in these little lines here. The grace she exuded without saying a word. I think this is a sort of a weaker. It's not a bad line, but it doesn't live up to the vividness of the rest of the descriptions. So maybe that's one to play with. She's gone without a sound. Gone beyond our once cherished girlhood. And I think the once cherished has the same kind of problems as the ridiculously expensive up here. It's just a little clunky and cluttery. It's too much for the rhythm of the poem. So she's gone without a sound, gone beyond our girlhood. I think that's a better ending. So that's what I would do here. Let's see what people are saying. Yeah, so Kelly McQuain says the needs to be in front of the cyber sea. Bella Anna says a very accessible poem. Sharon Ferrante says twirling her hair and pasta. That's interesting. Yeah, gone with the precision of her fingers twirling her hair in pasta. That's good. Makes that detail more interesting. And Susan Talley says, skip down to she's gone, never to come around again. The third she's gone, and around goes with twirl around. Not sure I'm following the comment. Gone with the precision of her fingers twirling. She's gone, never to come around. Gone with the women at sea. I'm not sure if I follow that. Let's see. Spartacus says the rhythm is really good. There's a musicality in this poem. Let's see. Okay. So I think that might be it. Does anybody else have any more comments on this poem? So this is very accessible, and just this poem I think feels almost done. It's just missing, this is one of those poems where it's pretty much working. And I like the ending too, gone beyond our girlhood. Like that's introduces sort of a new angle on what we've seen already, which works really well. So I like this ending too. This is one of those poems that it's almost ready to go, just needs a little bit of polish around the edges. There's some like little rough spots, like smoothing a gem or something, but it's almost there. So just, tinkering around a little bit, we get this sense of missing the former doormate, and we get a sense of who they were and what the relationship was. And then this interesting thing to sort of think on later is gone beyond their girlhood. So it becomes not so much a lament necessarily about the doormate herself, but about girlhood in general and missing that era. And we get back which comes back to this blue ink of our era. So I really love the way the poem is laid out. I think this is a really good one. Just needs a little bit of work around the edges. Any other comments? So Nate Jacobs says, I think our era sounds too big to be intimate. Left me wondering if there was an era when blue ink was all the rage. I don't know. I mean, I imagine, these postcards, they were going back and forth with a lot of blue ink. I think it was just a good detail. And it was, like I said, it was the era of our girlhood is the era we're talking about. Let's see. Lisa Ellison says grace could be demonstrated with something more concrete about her gesture and manner. Yeah, that's the thing. So other things have details. And then the grace, without having to say a word, is just a very generalized way of putting that concept. And so showing it with some kind of detail, and that's why it's weaker than the rest. So good to point out that. Thanks, Lisa. That what it's missing is the detail, and actually something you could see happening, like some kind of gesture or manner. Kelly McQuain says, I think the title may be better as Ode to a Lost Friend. Ode to a former dorm mate. Or Ode to a Lost Friend. I don't know. I mean, there is something very specific about the dorm era. Getting back to that, what that era of girlhood is. Like we know where it is in time. If it was just a lost friend, I think we wouldn't have that information about like what ages we're talking about. And so I think maybe the dorm mate works. It helps for that reason. It also could be like a former college friend or something like that would do the same purpose. Yeah. Anyway, I think the poem works. Let's move on to the next one. These are short, so it's going to be a shorter episode today, I think. Jim Langford says, lacquered black hair sounds nice, but that's poetry. But adjectives are to be avoided, so what to do? And, it's not that you can't ever use adjectives. They're just, they don't add as much flavor to the sauce as you think they do, or in general. Is the only thing. So a lot of times they're a little more empty than we sort of assume they are. Is the only thing with adjectives. But if they're functioning and actually adding things that we care about, if they're adding meaningful detail, then they're not to be avoided. So it just depends. And I think the was it her lacquer? And I wonder if this should be lacquered. Shouldn't that be a lacquered? Or it should be a hyphen. I should have pointed that out before. So it should either be lacquer black or lacquered black. But anyway, that's just great details. I like this poem a lot. And let's move on to the second poet for today. And the second poet is right here. It's Anam Tariq, and the first poem here is Candid. Let me take a coffee sip. Candid. Swinging amidst the tedious days, aloha to the yearly hiatus unconsciously shared with generations of my people. A soul not on the road, a walled park. The sharp, searing waves from the circle of light and the blue unsparing. The world under a spell of slumber, a solitary meandering. Soothing is the before the sunset phase, the homemade ice cream that aged hawker propelled. Festooned marketplace, a laden casket from beneath her parasol. Late afternoon diversions with her, a now elusive ritual. Samosas and sweets, evening rewards for all. Nights often dark, manual fanning, not yet uncommon in this part of the globe. For others, dishes delectable, that countered. The battle raged on in the courtyard. Foldable beds below the encompassing dark blue, which had vague diamonds pinned to it, against the sucking foes. And at other times, searching specters in the black wind, reticent, but not oblivious at grandma's, pouring back the spilled in the bowl of lyric. So this is an interesting poem. A lot, the other poem, somebody mentioned how accessible it was. This is a little less candid. Swinging amidst the tedious days. There are a lot of great phrases in here, and then there are a lot of ones that I'm having trouble following. Swinging amidst the tedious days. Aloha to the yearly hiatus, unconsciously shared with generations of my people. The yearly hiatus unconsciously shared with generations of my people. And so we wonder, or at least when you get that my people and there's no clues yet as to who my people are, it makes me wonder who my people are, which would help access the poem a little bit. I'm not sure. Aloha to the yearly hiatus unconsciously shared. The unconsciously is kind of cluttery too. Again, it's just a big lot of syllable words that break up the rhythm of the poem, shared with generations of my people. A soul not on the road, a walled park. The sharp, searing waves from the circle of light and the blue, unsparing. So since we're not really grounded yet, these lines could work if we sort of knew where we were, I think. But at this point in the poem, I'm not sure. We don't have any specific detail to place us in like a setting yet. And so it ends up being sort of detached. Like we see a walled park, but we don't know. It's almost like a walled park on like a white background of just like nothingness. So it's like this, like the images are sort of coming out of nothing. And there's no way to attach them. And so they don't have as much strength as they would if we knew where we were or what was going on, really. The sharp, searing waves from the circle of light and the blue, unsparing. And so again, I don't know where to put that image. It sounds interesting, but it's not like reachable at the moment. The world under a spell of slumber, a solitary meandering. Soothing as before the sunset phase, the homemade ice cream that the aged hawker propelled. So here we get the world under a spell of slumber, a solitary meandering, soothing as before the sunset phase, the homemade ice cream. I like the homemade ice cream that the aged hawker propelled. So we get a little bit more specific detail, like one image, like images sort of unfolding out of the emptiness in this poem, and we're sort of piecing it together, but it's too much work, I think. So it needs more setup to ground the poem and let us enter the world instead of have it like be detached as it's sort of growing out of nothing, if that makes sense. Festooned marketplace, a laden casket from beneath her parasol. Again, this is a good detail. I like I'm not really sure what to make of it, but it's interesting. Late afternoon diversions with her. So we get the her all of a sudden, too. The her with her parasol. And we don't know who that is either. A now elusive ritual. Samosas and sweets, evening rewards for all. Nights often dark, manual fanning, not yet uncommon in this part of the globe. And again, we get this part of the globe, but we're not sure where this part is. So even though it's interesting, there's no way to attach it there. But I like the manual fanning. Nights often dark, manual fanning, not yet uncommon in this part of the globe. So I like the detail. For others, dishes delectable that countered. The battle raged on in the courtyard. Foldable beds below the encompassing dark blue. We get the blue. Sort of on its own. Where'd I go? Oh, dark blue. Yeah, we get the dark blue on its own here. And we already had a dark blue on its own up here, too, where we didn't know where to put it really either. Where was that? The blue unsparing. So we don't know what these things refer to. Which has vague diamonds pinned to it. I like the vague diamonds line. There are interesting details and turns. Against the sucking foes. So who are the sucking foes? I guess the mosquitoes. At other times, searching specters in the black wind. Again, this is a good line, isolated. At other times, searching specters in the black wind. Reticent but not oblivious at grandma's, pouring back the spilled in the bowl of lyric. Again, so there are a lot of lines I like. There are a lot of great turns and interesting things. I mean, I'm sort of it's building a sense of some kind of like summerish vacation or break, like a but I'm not sure. There's just nowhere to put the details to make a coherent whole. So let's see what everyone's saying here about this poem. Bella Anna says it's like trying to work out the answers to a cryptic crossword. Yeah. And that's the thing. It feels, everything. They're puzzle pieces. It's almost like, maybe that's a better way to say it, but it's almost like we get interesting looking puzzle pieces, but we don't know how to put the puzzle together, really. And we spend all our time trying to think about how to put the puzzle together, even though, I understand eventually sort of what it's getting at about what the topic is. It's some place with a summer, the heat of the summer, and it's a warm area because of the mosquitoes and whatnot, and the life kind of slows down in the summer there, but that's kind of all you can pull together, and so it just needs more tying it up and letting us know what's going on. So maybe the title is not doing any work. So maybe if we could, instead of just candid, like I don't even know what candid really is referring to, and maybe that leads to part of the sort of confusion about what's really going on in the poem. But if the poem was, led us in the direction of what we wanted to talk about, then we would know how to take a lot of these things, and they might add up a little better. I love this last line. This pouring back the spilled in the bowl of lyric. It feels to me like the poem is kind of meandering just to get to that line. And I'm not sure what it means, but it's very interesting to me. I think there's a lot of spark in that last line. Nate Jacobs says, writing more like you talk will make this all more accessible. Sun, not circle of light, for example. Yeah, one of the founders or the grandfather of Rattle, you might say, is Jack Rapes, who we talk about a lot. He's a writer and actor in Los Angeles, and Rattle came from one of his workshops. It was the class chapbook that Alan Fox did back in 1994 for a Jack Rapes writing workshop. And one of Jack Rapes' mantras is "write like you talk," and that just brings out there's something magical in the spontaneity of natural speech. And what poetry is the music of natural speech, really. And so writing like you talk, if things aren't adding up, try to write like you talk is usually a good way to go. So that's a great suggestion. Thanks for sharing that, Nate. Over on YouTube, a lot of comments on YouTube. Sorry. So this is Anam Tariq is here. He says, "Hi, I wrote this poem about summer vacations in my country." Yeah, you get that. You can piece that together. But it's hard to piece it together. It takes too much effort, and then what does it add up to? You're sort of like I said, you're putting a puzzle together with these brightly colored shapes, and then by the end you get most of the puzzle done, but to the point where you're not sure if the whole puzzle is filled in, and is this what I'm looking at? There's this lack of clarity that makes it harder to connect to the content, is really the issue that's going on. But Nailima Karkana says bowl of lyric is a great ending. I love that. There's something about that that's really cool. Carlian Blackman says making me work too hard. It's a good simple way to put it. Thanks, Carlian. Dick Westheimer says, on a craft level, the 4-syllable words ending lines and the multiple series of 3- and 4-syllable words are themselves tedious. They make me feel like my mouth is full of marbles. Yeah, that's the issue. Tedious is a good word for that, too. It's just moving over, polysyllabic words. Really slows down, breaks up the rhythm, and it feels like you have to, climb over it. Like we hike in the woods a lot. And we're up in the mountains, and Peluvian schist is the material that sort of undergirds us instead of bedrock. And so there's all these scarps where the rock just falls over everywhere, and you have to climb up these kind of rubble piles right in the middle of the trail all the time. And that's what it feels like when you encounter those long words in the middle of poems. It's like it's this rubble pile of syllables that you have to climb over. And that's why I try to avoid that, unless it's a poem where that really fits the speech of the speaker all the way through. There's certain ways you can do it, but it's tricky, and you have to. The other problem with a lot of long syllable words, and just unconsciously a circle, so I'm pointing at that, but it's a lot of syllables for very little payoff too. So if you look at a poet, what is the guy's name? God, I'm so bad with my memory. What is that British poet? Who, God, why am I can't remember the name of his name or the title of any of his books. right now. But he writes these shortish kind of poems that have so many words that are really digging down deep in the dictionary. But then he does it in a way. Oh, why can't I remember his name? But he does it in a way that it's adding like richness to the detail instead of like the word like unconsciously doesn't add a whole lot for how many syllables it is. Why am I not remembering his name? Because I would love to pull up an example right now. Anyway, we'll have to pass that by. But I just have a mental block on his name. But anyway, let's. So this poem just needs more clarity, and maybe write like you talk. Try that. Because we really too. One of the things you have to remember is we're really drawn to to storytelling. It's one of our minds evolved through an oral tradition, and so we find storytelling compelling. And one of the tricks to poetry is to getting that natural speech into a poem so you can transfer it on the page as if you're like speaking to somebody. And so we sort of have a natural, there's a salience to it that's sort of hardwired when someone's telling us an important story. Like we're looking for meaning in story all the time. And so using voice in a natural musical way, it's just something we're drawn to. And so trying that would really help with this poem, I think. Let's see. So Clayton Clark says, just joining, love the ending and the first line. Swinging amidst the tedious days. Yeah, what if it was like this? What if you just had because I did like the first line too. What if that was like a haiku? Swinging amidst the tedious days, pouring back the spilled in the bowl of the lyric. What if that was just like a haiku or something? Or just a very short poem? That would be cool, because I do like those details. And Jasmine Carr says the title is Candid, though the poem feels the opposite of being candid. Yeah, there's sort of an irony there. Okay, let's move on to the next poem. And let me remind you, don't forget to click the like button. Only 2 likes on the YouTube right now, because that is helpful. The if you want stuff like this to show up on the sidebar on YouTube, people clicking stuff helps. And Facebook too, whether or not it'll show up in people's Facebook feeds, because you know how Facebook works. It's just impossible to show every post, because if you have more than like a couple hundred friends, you end up getting like 100 posts a day that they could show you. And if you have 1,000 friends plus all the ads and plus the groups and pages and things that are inserted, there's just too much content. So just like be popping with posts over and over again, and so they have to filter it. And so they filter it based on interaction. And so the more you interact, the more it will show up in people's feeds who subscribe to want to see Rattle posts. So the fact that there's a lot of interaction is what helps posts show up. So please do click the like button, is all I'm saying. Anyway, let's do the second poem. Again, this is Anam Tariq. And the reason why that I like to do 2 poems for the critique of the week is to see if the same issues come up. It's always interesting to look at 2 poems and see, like, is this one going to have the same interesting lines but sort of lost in the ambiguity and the lack of clarity in what's going on? Or is it like a one-off issue that happened just with that poem? So we'll see. So here we go. Letters to loved ones. Papa, water to my tree that gleams through the veined leaves and backs. Your music that chaperones, only if swift enough for you to dulcify the awaiting blue moon. Mama, whose affections I can rest assured, whose words my choice become, by destiny bonded, your eccentricities over a contemplative demeanor oft to glower summon to my face. Miriam, of all of them I've had, after an 11-year-old chasm and the changing seasons wilting, our ground holds up. Your childish speech, the envied long curls, games of badminton and Barbies, the tires had perhaps squeaked when I cleared off. Taylor, the blonde hair whose golden bangs a forehead that mantle shimmery nails, and Stella McCartney on a trapeze. When you get them looking, if only you knew, in the pastel seasons of your world, you made someone lose herself. So it's letters to loved ones. And here we do understand the setup a little better of what's going on. So letters to loved ones, and then we get who the loved one is. And so that these are letters to loved ones, and these are loved ones. So it's all very clear what's going on. And notice how as abstract as the poem gets, and how hard to know sometimes what the lines are referring to or what they mean, you still feel connected to the poem the whole time, just because you know who the poem is talking to, or who the speaker's talking to, and about what. Like, just having that basic information at the head. I know these are letters to loved ones. This is the one to my papa. Just knowing that lets so much more connection happen, because we know what's going on. So, water to my tree that gleams through the veined leaves and backs. So water to my tree. I love that, as a description of the papa. I like that. Water to my tree that gleams through the veined leaves. I love those first two lines. And backs, though, I'm a little confused about. I'm not sure I'm following that and backs. Your music that chaperones. Again, I like the verbification of the chaperone. Your music that chaperones. Only if swift enough were you to dulcify the awaiting blue moon. Now here I'm a little lost. Dulcify, does that mean sweeten or not? Dulcify. Yeah, that means sweeten. So only if swift enough were you to sweeten, to dulcify the awaiting blue moon. So only if swift enough. Your music that chaperones is, so there's some confusion just in what's like physically, like literally going on at this part. So your music that chaperones, is it the music that has to be swift enough, or is it the papa themselves or himself? Only if swift enough were you to dulcify the awaiting blue moon. Only if swift enough were you to dulcify the awaiting blue moon. It's a little abstract in a way that I'm not following, and I'm kind of okay with it. I don't know. I think this section could be improved, though. I don't know. Let me see what people are saying. I want to make sure I get the comments in. So Nate Jacob says there's sweetness in those letters. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, good way to put it, too. Susan Michelle Cornell. What about paring it down? How about your music chaperone, swift enough to dulcify the blue moon? I think I think maybe these are a little bit too, they could be shorter and more condensed. I think that's a good suggestion by Susan. Only if swift enough. And the dulcify just feels too much for me. But only if swift enough for the blue moon. Like if it was that much condensed, maybe that would feel a little better. Yeah, and Sharon Ferrante says this would make a great haiku sequence. She said, I love the last one. Was it Taylor? And it was Taylor. And it would make a great haiku sequence, or maybe, or at least maybe thinking like a haiku or like a tanka sequence. Thinking about that kind of condension, it feels like you could really squeeze these down a lot more, and in doing so, make them like hard as diamond, kind of, Anyway, let's look at more in detail, one by one. Mama, whose affections I can rest assured, whose words my choice become. I think the syntax is a little off there. Whose words my choice, because it's one choice, so it'd have to be a becomes. I can rest assured whose words my choice becomes. By destiny bonded, your eccentricities over a contemplative demeanor. So again, we get these, these rubble piles that we were talking about before, the eccentricities over a contemplative demeanor. That's a lot to say. Off to glower, summoned to my face. Interesting, though. Yeah, I mean, I feel like these could just be condensed further. And I think writing like a tanka, I'm thinking tanka sequence for these would work really well, because they're 6 lines. They could be 5 really easily. Yeah, Sharon Friday says, Mama, the big words take away from it. They do. They just, the big words, big words and adjectives, they're just not as like densely meaningful as other words are. That's just the way it happens to be. And there's a reason for that too. It's actually, it has to do with the way, nouns are the words that come first in language. Like, we name things, and so they end up being, quicker a lot of times, like shorter and more physical. And adjectives tend to be longer and more abstract. And then we get into the sort of headspace outside of the physical world, and those end up being longer and longer words. And the longest words are all like legal and medical things that are completely, detached from the world of objects. Anyway, Miriam, of all of them I've had, after an 11-year-old chasm and the changing seasons wilting, our ground holds up. Your childish speech, the envied long curls, games of badminton and Barbies. The tires perhaps squeaked when I cleared off. So I like this one too. I think this one is a little clearer than the others, which makes it nice. Of all of them I've had, after an 11-year-old, and there should be hyphens, 11-year-old chasm, and the changing seasons wilting, our ground holds up. There's something, again, similar to the up here. There's something wrong with this, the syntax. And the changing seasons wilting, our ground holds up. Or maybe it's just clunky, and it's actually technically correct. Of all of them I've had, after an 11-year-old chasm and the changing seasons wilting. Oh, I guess maybe it needs a comma. There's a comma there, because it's really, of all of them I've had, this whole thing is a parenthetical aside clause, or whatever you call it. So it's really, of all of them I've had, our ground holds up. So it needs the comma there, and that clears up the syntax. So there you go. Your childish speech, the envied long curls, games of badminton and Barbies. I like the badminton and Barbies, the nice B sounds there. The tires had perhaps squeaked when I cleared off. And again, this is a great detail. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but I kind of get it, and I like that. So I think this works really well too. And here's Taylor, which was Sharon's favorite, I think. The blonde hair, whose golden bangs, a forehead that mantle. Shimmery nails, in Stella McCartney on a trapeze when you get them looking. If only you knew, in the pastel seasons of your world, you made someone lose herself. I love the pastel seasons of your world, and I like the really great ending there. Let's see. So again, I think each of these, I think, would be stronger if they were condensed a little bit. So I'm going to go back to this haiku or tanka sequence idea, but I think that's what I would do, is try to get it into, or maybe even just haiku, like get it as tight as possible. And I think that it would stand out. Each one would be a little more powerful if it like took the details and made it even more condensed. Anna says, Miriam is my favorite. I think maybe the arrangement of the lines could be improved. So in Miriam. Yeah, and we do have, articles ending here and here. So there's some of these where the line breaks don't feel natural either. So I'd play with it to make it feel natural as it comes out. So Nate Jacobs says, a lot of this reads a bit too much like a too tight translation, stilted and out of order. A rewrite that maintains the sweetness would be the first priority, so that noun, adjective, and noun, verb orders are easier to read. Yeah, good point. Good point. And let me over on YouTube. Jasmine Carr says, your music that chaperones is my favorite. Yeah, I love that line. I think that my favorite's the Papa. I like that. I love the first two lines, the gleams through the vein leaves, and I like your music that chaperones. I like that a lot. And Nylima Karkana says you could edit out up from that phrase. Where's the... Oh, down here. The of all of them I've had, after an 11-year-old chasm and the changing seasons wilting, our ground holds. Yeah, you could cut the up. That's not a bad suggestion. And also, Lisko would get rid of the perhaps. Where's the perhaps? Yeah. Yeah, I would too. There's that whole, I mentioned this many times, but there's a famous edit of on the Wasteland, and Pound says, "Perhaps be damned." And so every time I see perhaps in a poem, oops, be damned. You know, T.S. Eliot wrote perhaps something or other, and that was what's his name's Ezra Pound's quote in the margins, cutting out perhaps, and yeah, because perhaps, you know, like, be sure of yourself, and you know, you're telling us a story that has meaning, and so don't hedge, just get rid of perhaps. Yeah, and Jasmine says the had too. Yeah, the tires squeaked when I cleared off. It's a great detail, and just be confident in it and don't hedge. Let's see. Leska says the language feels a bit forced in a way that makes me expect rhymes. And Nylima says an even more specific title could work. So even more than letters to loved ones. Yeah, I mean, like, why? The one thing that a title like this does, it sort of implies that these are the loved ones. And are there only 4 loved ones? And if not, why these 4? So maybe more detail in the title would be interesting. There might be more to it than we're realizing. Okay, well, that is going to be... one last glance. Okay, that is going to be the show for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. As always, hopefully these were helpful for Anam, Tariq, and Jackie Chou, who I saw Jackie in the comments, too, just now. So Jackie was here. Great to see you both. Once again, the poems were... we had letters to loved ones, which I thought condensing these into even shorter sections would be cool. We had Candid, which was lacking clarity. And we just need better storytelling, I think, but there's really great details. And for Jackie, we had Stagnant, which I love the middle section and just wanted to turn in a different direction, I would say. And an ode to a former dorm mate, which maybe a better title, or maybe, but a little bit of polishing up here and there, but great poem otherwise. So those are the 4 poems we looked at today. Thanks as always for doing this. It's always a pleasure. And continue, if you're watching this after the fact, you can still leave comments and share your thoughts on the poems. The chat windows aren't up, but if there's comments below the videos. I think on Facebook, yeah, the comments go in the same spot no matter what. So you can still add, especially on Facebook, and I'm sure the poets will look back later and see other comments too if you're not watching this live. Now, the next poet for the Rattlecast is going to be Ananda Lima coming up. That's Rattlecast number 118, Sunday at the usual time. Ananda's first full-length book, she has some chapbooks, but her first full-length book is Motherland, which just came out from, who published it? Yeah, Black Lawrence Press, that's what I thought. A beautiful book and a wonderful person. I'm really looking forward to talking to Ananda Lima. The prompt for this week was to write an apology poem. So if you'd like to participate in the open lines and you want to share a prompt-based poem, write an apology. And that's pretty open-ended, pretty self-explanatory, so just apologize. Apologize for something real and personal, that someone who needs an apology. Make an abstract apology to some inanimate object. Do whatever you want. But that is your prompt for this week, and that is your guest for this week. Ananda Lima, Rattlecast 118, Sunday, November 14th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend in the meantime. Goodbye.